Success in the past was using block grants to spur innovation for the states, competition, and how best to help care for the needy. I believe that the federal mandates, to the extent that they exist, should allow for individual states' creativity, and that we should go to a similar system so that when a state gets federal funding, they can use it for any lawful purpose under that. That will reinforce the fact that our schools should be locally controlled and that the state is the primary place where educational policy should be made, not the federal government. I believe that that innovation, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and what we'll see is the growth of wonderful university programs like we have here in Minnesota. But it's the stifling mandate and overregulation of education that's coming out of the federal government that is causing our students to fail in the race to success against other nations.
Thank you. Steve Carlson, if you'd be the next to address that same question. What changes would you like to see made to our current education policies, and please address the role that the federal government should play in preparing our youth to compete on a world stage?
You know, I was looking at the Constitution on Constitution Day, and I saw that there it says that the federal government shall promote science and technology. I thought, this is something you don't hear very often. Well, how do they do it? They do it through patents and copyrights of writings and discoveries. But it shows that we clearly put science in a very strong position, and we should focus on that. What I would like to do is to cut back the Department of Education. I'd like to get them out of the student loan program. Frankly, I look to them as a place where we can have a lot of savings. And then I want to put the work back to the state of Minnesota. We've had vouchers. Rudy Perpich had great ideas with school choice, and we were really a leader. Charter schools, we can go back and do that. That can create jobs for teachers. They don't need to get in unions to do that. There's going to be a lot of educational activity. We've got to move onto the internet. We've got to have programs that are available to everybody in science and math that have the greatest scientists and educators putting those together that people will use their whole life. That's what I like.
Thank you. Betty McCollum, if you'd be the next to answer the question, what changes, if any, would you like to see made to current education policies? Please address the role that the federal government should play in preparing our youth to compete on a world stage.
Public education, a strong public education system is critical in us being able to compete regionally, nationally, and internationally. That's where our workforce gets its strong foundation, whether it's preparing children early, enforcing parents with the help that they need in order for their children to succeed in grade school, and then to have accessibility to trade schools and to college for our students. If we do that, our nation grows strong. That's the crux of public education. That's what's made us the strongest, most vibrant country in the world. But when I hear just blanket statements, so maybe in a rebuttal someone could answer this, that we should repeal all regulations. It harkens back to me in the days when I was in South St. Paul High School. There was a lovely teacher. His name was Mr. Wasco. But all children, whether it was a physical disability, a mental disability, or a learning disability, were all put in one classroom away. Now, I believe the federal government should pay for its obligation in special education, but I would never repeal it.
Thank you. Teresa Collett has indicated an interest in a 30-second rebuttal.
I don't think anyone said we should repeal all regulation, but I certainly think, for example, the IDEA plan, which is the special education program from the federal government, should follow the student. It should be able to go into charter schools and into private schools. The fact is that private schools do a better job educating inner city kids than public schools, as has been shown again and again by studies out of the University of Chicago. But there is a role to ensure that every child gets educated. In this case, I'm relying on the creativity and the will of the parents at the local level to make sure that happens.
Thank you. Steve Carlson has indicated an interest in offering a 30-second rebuttal.
I think the best. I think the best two schools that I ever got a chance to go to are the ones that I'm auditing now at St. Cloud. And then I got a scholarship from Minha Academy. Now these are religious schools. And I think we got to take a look at this. We've got to look at giving kids a chance to go to these schools. The Catholic Church, they're shutting down a lot of their schools. These are good schools, and they can train people in the right values. So I would look at ways that we could encourage people like that to participate in physical education.
Thank you. Betty McCollum, if you would be the first candidate to answer the next question. In the wake of the economic tumult we've seen, what do you think is the proper role for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac moving forward?
Fannie and Freddie need to have a lot better oversight. A lot better oversight. But Fannie and Freddie is not the federal government. The federal government guarantees the mortgage, but they are not the federal government. Fannie and Freddie secure loans after mortgages have been made. We had a terrible problem in our mortgage. We had a crisis. There was no oversight. People were being ripped off by unscrupulous mortgage companies. People were encouraged at times to take out second mortgage for their homes, and then people were allowed to even purchase mortgages when they couldn't even document that they had a job and they could afford to pay. That was wrong. And I'm glad I voted for strong regulation to stop that from happening again in the future.
Yeah, it's Barney.
So we need to have strong oversight, not only for Fannie and Freddie, but we need to make sure that we have strong oversight in all our mortgages.
Thank you. Steve Carlson, if you'd be the next to answer the same question, what do you think is the proper role for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac moving forward?
Well, I heard moving forward and I heard in the future, but this should have been looked at a long time ago. There was resistance to people trying to regulate these two agencies, and I think I've heard Teresa say that Betty sent letters to people that not to get too involved in that. I know Barney Frank made some really bad decisions. I don't know if everybody knows, but today in the paper I was reading in the Wall Street Journal that there's going to be like $260 billion bailout for either just Freddie or both Freddie and Fannie combined. I mean, it's going to dwarf everything we've done. The GM bailout was only $50 billion. And why? Because 90% of the loans now are backed by Freddie and Fannie. Now, they say they're not a government agency, but then why do the taxpayers have to keep bailing them out? Okay? Obviously, they are. And so they're like quasi-governmental. And it needs to be revisited. We've got to get that under control. Personally, I'm not in favor of a lot of mortgage-backed securities. I would like to see more of them held by the banks and a lot more of the money held there.
Thank you. Teresa Collett, if you'd answer the same question, what do you think is the proper role for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac moving forward?
I am absolutely delighted to hear Congresswoman McCollum say that there needs more greater regulation, because when Fannie and Freddie first evidenced serious trouble and President Bush proposed that we put more stringent financial regulations on them, Betty McCollum joined a letter from several congresspeople telling the president that he was overemphasizing financial stability and that what we should be really worried about is making sure that mortgages flowed freely. The liar loans that she proposed were in fact part of that free flow of mortgages. As Steve said, Fannie and Freddie currently insure 95% of new loans. They are acting irresponsibly, and it is surprising to me that in the Financial Reform Act, which Congresswoman McCollum voted for, they did not take that opportunity to reform Fannie and Freddie. If they had done so, perhaps we would not see the increasing bailout that we're being asked. I personally think that the GSE, which is what Congresswoman McCollum referred to, should be eased out, and we should move those more to the private sector.
Thank you. Betty McCollum has indicated interest in a 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you. I wrote a letter to President Bush dated June 28th that has been referenced. Let me read you a couple other excerpts from the letter that I signed. Oversight and rigorous affordable housing efforts. Instead, over and over again in this letter, I encourage President Bush to do rigorous oversight. And in fact, the last line is, we ask you to work with us to craft legislation that achieves the proper balance in both areas, including oversight. Oversight was failed to be done by the Bush administration.
Thank you.